My name is Anna, and I want you to picture a Thanksgiving dinner so awkward that even the cranberry sauce seemed to curdle in silence. My mother, Deborah, stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, her smile perfectly rehearsed. "It's time," she said brightly, "that my daughter finally pays me back for college, with interest." The room froze. Forks hovered midair. My cousins blinked at one another. My aunt stopped cutting the turkey. And there I was, 29 years old, accused of owing my own mother $50,000 I absolutely did not owe. It was the moment every manipulator lives for. Public humiliation dressed up as moral duty. But the delicious irony? Every penny she claimed I owed came from money that had been mine all along. My father's final gift. Stolen twice over. If you've ever had someone rewrite history to make themselves the hero of a story they destroyed, buckle in. This one burns slow before it explodes. When I was 19, I thought Deborah was my guardian angel. It was a crisp September morning when she sat me down in our kitchen, the same small space where my father, Benjamin, used to hum off-key while flipping Sunday pancakes, years before cancer took him away. Steam curled above her coffee mug as she spoke in a soft maternal voice that could have sold sadness to saints. "Sweetheart," she began, "I want to help you pay for college. All of it. Your father would have wanted this." I remember my entire body relaxing in relief. I'd been terrified of student loans, working myself up just thinking about interest rates. And there she was, smiling bravely, her eyes full of supposed sacrifice. "Are you sure, Mom?" I asked. "It's a lot of money." She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said with that saintly smile, "Family takes care of family. I'm just doing what he can't." In hindsight, that was her opening move, the first line of a long-term trap. Over the next 4 years, she made sure everyone knew what a generous mother she was. At family dinners, she'd lightly mention her investment in Anna's education. She'd sigh when my cousins discussed student loans. "Not everyone is lucky enough to have a free ride," she'd say, smiling right at me. But her eyes, sharp as glass, said something else entirely. At the time, I brushed it off. Deborah had always been a little theatrical, desperate for validation. I thought she just needed her sacrifices acknowledged. I had no idea she was crafting a debt that would come due years later. College was my freedom. I threw myself into studying marketing, spent late nights in the library, made real friends for the first time. I even met Jack, the guy with the guitar and the easy laugh. I called Mom every Sunday, eager to tell her about my classes and part-time bookstore job. She always sounded proud, too proud. "You're lucky, sweetheart," she'd remind me. "Your cousin Gregory's working 2 jobs just to pay for community college." Count your blessings, I did. I really did. I graduated summa cum laude. Found my first job at a startup, then upgraded to a better one at 25. By 29, I had my own apartment, my own car, and a small savings account that made me feel like a real adult. That's when Mom decided it was time to collect Thanksgiving 2018. My Aunt Janet's sprawling colonial house was glowing with candles and the smell of roasted turkey. Everyone was there. My cousins Rachel and Alexander, Grandma Diane, Uncle Patrick, half the family tree. The kind of evening that's supposed to feel warm and nostalgic. Mom looked flawless, her favorite burgundy dress perfectly pressed, her smile polished to perfection. She stood, raised her glass, and in the same sugary voice she'd used on me 10 years earlier said, "I think my daughter owes me $50,000 for the college education I paid for." With interest, of course. Every sound vanished. You could have heard a fork drop. "Mom," I whispered, my hands trembling. "You said it was a gift." She waved her hand like she was brushing away dust. "Oh, Anna, don't twist my words. You owe me, and everyone here knows it. I sacrificed everything for your future. All I'm asking for is fairness." I looked around the table. Rachel frowned like I'd just confessed to kicking puppies. Alexander shook his head. Even Grandma Diane, whose eyesight had faded, but judgment remained sharp, looked disappointed. Deborah had crafted the narrative so well that my denial made me look like the villain, the spoiled daughter turning her back on her saintly mother. After most guests left, she cornered me in the kitchen. The candlelight softened nothing about her face. "You are nothing without me," she hissed, voice low, words sliding like poison. "I made you who you are. Pay me what you owe, or I'll make everyone see you for what you really are. A selfish, ungrateful child." It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so terrifying. The harassment started the next morning. Texts, voicemails. "Anna, we need to talk about your payment plan. It's disappointing that you're so ungrateful. Family loyalty used to mean something." Within days, the gossip network had blossomed. Aunt Catherine called to express concern about my financial irresponsibility. Cousin Julie sent a Facebook message saying she was shocked to learn I was refusing to pay my mother back. The thing about gaslighting is that it works best when the truth is messy and slow to prove. Soon even I began to waver. I replayed that college conversation, wondering if I'd misunderstood. Maybe she had said it was a loan. Maybe I'd just heard what I wanted to hear. But then came one sleepless December night when I heard my father's voice in my memory, as clearly as if he were sitting beside my bed. "Anna." When someone tries to rewrite history, the truth is usually hiding in the paperwork. Dad was meticulous. He kept every record, every receipt, carefully filed in manila folders labeled in his neat block handwriting. If Deborah had paid for my college, there'd be proof somewhere. The next morning, I drove to my storage unit and started tearing through boxes. Birth certificates, report cards, tax files, an entire paper history of my life. It took 3 days of sorting before I found it. A dusty folder marked Education Fund. I spread the papers out on my kitchen table. My hands shook as I flipped through each statement. And then I saw it, the smoking gun. Every tuition payment to the university had come from one single account. My father's life insurance policy. Benjamin had purchased that policy years before he got sick. The payout had been designated specifically for my education and care. Money legally mine, placed in Deborah's guardianship until I turned 18, and then held in trust for educational expenses. She hadn't given a dime of her own money. She had used my inheritance, the legacy my father left for me, to look generous in front of the world. For 10 years I had thanked her for something that had been mine all along. She'd lied so convincingly that she made me feel indebted for receiving what she'd stolen. All at once, the truth snapped into focus. She hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen credit, dignity, memory. She had rewritten my father's final act of love and signed her own name at the bottom. The fury that filled me wasn't ordinary anger. It was volcanic, centuries old. It started as a heat in my chest, pulsing upward, until my hands trembled and spots flashed behind my eyes. But underneath that molten rage was something else, cold, sharp, and deliberate. Clarity. For the first time in weeks, Ike knew exactly what I needed to do. I made copies of everything: bank statements, insurance documents, trust agreements. Then I called a lawyer, Alexander's college roommate, Gregory, who specialized in financial fraud. He looked over the documents and confirmed what I already knew. What Deborah hadn't wasn't just morally wrong, it was legally questionable, misrepresenting the source of funds used for a minor scare, then attempting to collect payment for those funds could potentially constitute fraud. "Do you want to press charges?" Gregory asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "Not yet," I said. "But I want to know that I could if he needed to." Christmas dinner was held at Janet's house again. Same dining room, same long table, but this time I came prepared. I had a manila folder tucked discreetly in my purse, and I'd spent hours rehearsing what I would say. Deborah was in her element, holding court at one end of the table, regaling everyone with stories of her sacrifices and her disappointment in my lack of gratitude. She was wearing her martyr mask perfectly, sighing dramatically whenever someone mentioned college expenses. "I just don't understand how I raised such a selfish daughter," she said, shaking her head sadly. "I gave her everything, and she can't even acknowledge what she owes me." The table was nodding along sympathetically. Even Patrick, who had always been kind to me, looked disappointed. This was her moment of triumph. She had successfully turned the entire family against me. That's when I stood up. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I don't owe you a single penny because you didn't pay for my college. Dad did." The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. My cousin Rachel's fork clattered against her plate. "What are you talking about?" Janet asked, confusion written across her face. I pulled out the manila folder and began spreading documents across the table, careful to keep my movements calm and deliberate. "These are the bank statements from my college years," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Every tuition payment, every dormitory fee, every cent that was supposedly Deborah's generous gift. It all came from Dad's life insurance policy. Money he left specifically for me education. Money that was already mine. The silence was absolute. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking. Could hear someone's sharp intake of breath. Deborah's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, denial, and then something that looked almost like panic. It was still," she stammered. "You stole credit for Dad's provision." I continued, feeling a decade of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. "You let me believe for 10 years that you had sacrificed for me, that I owed you gratitude for your generosity. You made me feel guilty for accepting help that was my birthright. And then you tried to charge me $50,000 for my own inheritance." The room erupted. Janet grabbed one of the bank statements, her eyes scanning the numbers. Alexander leaned over her shoulder, pointing at specific entries. Patrick muttered, something under his breath that sounded like, "Jesus Christ, this says Benjamin Richards Life Insurance Trust." Rachel read aloud, "Anna, this is your money." Deborah was still trying to salvage the situation, her voice getting higher and more desperate. "I was his wife. I managed that money. I raised her. I deserved." "You deserved nothing," I said, my voice cutting through her protest like a knife. "You were the trustee. Your job was to use that money for my benefit, not to take credit for it, and then try to collect payment later." But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said quietly, misusing a minor's inheritance funds and then attempting to collect payment for those funds. Well, let's just say there are legal terms for that kind of behavior. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Diane, my grandmother, looked like she might faint. Catherine was staring at Deborah with a mixture of horror and disgust. "Anna," Deborah said, her voice now small and pleading. "You wouldn't." "I won't." "Press charges," I said, and I saw relief flicker across her face. "But I'm done. No more guilt trips, no more manipulation, no more playing the victim while painting me as the villain. We're finished." I gathered up my documents, tucked them back into the folder, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear the beginning of what sounded like a very uncomfortable family conversation. The fallout was swift and complete. Within a week, I started getting phone calls from family members who wanted to apologize. Rachel called to say she was horrified by what she'd learned. Catherine sent a long text message expressing her regret for doubting me. Even Patrick, who rarely got involved in family drama, reached out to say he was sorry for not seeing through Deborah's manipulation sooner. Deborah's reputation, the carefully crafted image of the sacrificing single mother, was destroyed overnight. The same relatives who had once praised her selflessness now whispered about her deception. The woman who had built her identity on being the family martyr was suddenly seen for what she really was, a manipulator who had stolen credit for her dead husband's love and provision. He changed my phone number and blocked her on all social media. For the first time in my adult life, I was free from her psychological games. Free from the constant undercurrent of guilt and obligation that had colored every interaction we'd had since I was 19. 3 months later, I got a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from Deborah, 2 pages of handwritten apologies and explanations, begging me to call her, promising she had changed. I read it once, then threw it away without a second thought, because sometimes revenge isn't about making someone pay. It's about exposing the truth and watching their house of lies collapse under its own weight. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to a manipulator is simply refuse to be manipulated anymore. My father's love had protected me even after death, and I had finally honored that gift by refusing to let anyone else claim credit for it. The inheritance Deborah tried to steal wasn't just money. It was the knowledge that I was worthy of love and support, without having to earn it through guilt and obligation. And that knowledge, once reclaimed, was something no one could ever take away from Megan. The most powerful moment wasn't seeing Deborah's face crumble. It was walking away knowing that I would never again doubt my own worth or my father's love. She had tried to rewrite our family's history. But the truth was, there all along, waiting patiently in those manila folders. Some people asked why I didn't press charges, why I didn't make her pay financially for what she'd done. But I realized that the most devastating punishment for someone who built their identity on being seen as virtuous was simply being seen clearly. Deborah lost something more valuable than money. She lost the family's respect, and she lost her ability to control the narrative. My father Benjamin had provided for me twice. Once, through his insurance policy, and once, through his meticulous record-keeping that eventually set me free. If this story resonated with you, or if you've dealt with family manipulation yourself, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had someone try to rewrite history to make themselves look better? Hit that like button if you believe the truth. Always finds a way to surface, and subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be victims of manipulation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to play the game anymore.